Lakeland PBS presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Closed captioning is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm producer-director Scott Knudsen. In this special director's cut, take a longer, more in-depth look at the tour that Karen Goulet granted of her art exhibit at the Watermark Art Center.
This is what I consider the first collaborative work of the Abajijuan exhibit, with myself and Monique both working on this piece. The idea was conceived as to how to connect and reflect and show what happens along the river. I consider this sort of DNA memory of the Mississippi River banks. These braids were buried in, I believe, 8 different locations. They started down in the New Orleans area at Studio in the Woods was where I put the first braids into the ground. Monique had several sites where she wanted to have the braids buried. And then I came back north and buried them in 4 locations in this area and then brought them together. I've been envisioning this particular thing for a long time, and I'm really happy that it was close to, to what I was imagining it to be. So there's a lot of things going on in my mind when I make art that have connections for me, and I try to have those come through in the work. And this idea of a DNA memory, braids are really a beautiful aesthetic thing that I've done most of my life. And so it was sort of this sharing or gathering what the land around the Mississippi River wanted to give us for this exhibit, so that people can get a sense or a feel or an energy, because I believe that these all have distinct colors, but there also is this energy that comes with the DNA memory. And they're saying now DNA memory goes back many generations, so if we have DNA memory, I believe, doesn't the land have it as well? Again, these are what the earth gave to us, but the more healthy the soil, the more that's going on, the more happened to the fabric. So that was sort of an interesting process to look at. I think there's a pattern to it, but also a randomness, because they were different sheets, used sheets, and in different places. So there's this continuity is the braid, otherwise it's the energy of the work of the artists and the land. So I feel like this piece is where we really began the exhibit installation and our work most consciously as collaborative, because we do have independent works that are responding to conversations and to each other's work as well. But I love this piece as the connector for us and for the audience. The whole river, or both ends of the river, has some representation here. Monique responded to this piece by creating and producing maps of all the locations where we buried the fabric braids, which I really love. And she collected water from those sites as well. So this mirrors this piece. And so it's telling the same story a different way, which I really love that concept. So it's speaking in the language of maps and in the language of water, but it's also talking about where these pieces were before they arrived here. I really love that Monique's aesthetic and her love for maps is she chose maps that spoke to her. They aren't necessarily all created in the same timeline or from the same original source. And I think that's what makes it really beautiful and its own representation. I love that she brought the water up from the bayou here and we went out and collected water. So there were steps that happened for us as we drove around and did these things that were meaningful for us. And this cypress wood she had shipped up, there's a whole story about that and what's going on with losing the land down there. So she wanted to be really thorough in how she represented her land base and her homelands as well. And so I love this sort of back and forth conversation that's going on between these pieces. And I love the things she brought from the land to add as well. So this wonderful body of work by Monique was created after her trips up here. She had come up 3 times. And so it's a combination of images from her homelands and from here and people that she met. And they were all created in response to the work that is next to it. But I love the sort of patch blanket sort of metaphor that is part of this aesthetic. So this sense of connecting things together visually, but also metaphorically and content-wise. And again, it was done in response to my work, Unfinished Business. And so I love that we sat down and she had me tell her the stories, because each of my pieces has a story. And so each of her pieces has a story as well. I think that this mindful or thoughtfulness of how we listen to each other and how we are inspired by each other was really important for us and for this exhibit to come into being as rich and complete as it is. When we came in and started thinking about, of course, the exhibit itself is a collaborative work, and we thought about what are we going to put in this space, what do we want to show, what do we want to share, and then the conversations. She had seen me making my pieces over a period of 2 years and really liked those, so she wanted to focus on doing a response piece. So this install as a whole is called Unfinished Business, and it's a play on the fact that all these pieces are made with scrap fabrics from other things that I've created, like star quilts, ceremony blankets, ribbon shirts, skirts, and so I save everything. And it originated at the beginning of our exchange, Big River Exchange, when I was not able to go down to studio in the woods because of COVID, and we were all being, kept inside. I was like, what can I do? How am I going to work and make art? So I had a stay-at-home residency, and I was just sort of thinking, and I had this aha moment, and I created a piece and went, this is it, and I just took off with it. And I've made 32 pieces so far. There's 28 in this configuration, and they're all stories. So for me, the process of stitching with a needle and thread is about connection to my relatives, my ancestors, because that particular skill was passed down to me. And when I'm sitting and hand stitching and thinking, I'm having conversations with the ancestors, I'm remembering a wonderful event or a beautiful sunset or a moment in time that impacted me and has stayed with me. So there's a wide variety. There's songs in here as well. So there's all kinds of information in these, but I pointedly, my intention was to have sort of this raw or less polished perfection. I wanted to liberate myself from trying to be perfect or try to have the perfect stitch, but to let the stitches do what they wanted to do. And so some of these, the story comes out of creating the piece. All of a sudden I'm putting things together and a story comes. Sometimes there's a story that wants to be told and I'm finding what I think will tell that story. So they're nice because they're sort of spontaneous and they don't take forever to make. A lot of, like when I work on blankets and quilts, those can take several days, you know, or I'm making a pair of moccasins or something that, where these, I can have something done in a few hours and be really enjoying it. So they are a little freer, but I think they're a whole story as well. And that's why when I called it unfinished business, it's like, I don't know if I'll ever stop making them now. I'm taking a rest at the moment, but I keep coming back to them because there's more to stitch about. So I think I'd like to talk about the star quilt that I created, because that is a big jump from the fabric scrap pieces to one of the larger style of works that I do. And so this is a very intentional piece that changed. I knew I wanted to make a star blanket that talked about the fragility of our environment, our time, just this whole sense of transparency, how do we talk about what it is that we're needing to do, because we're in this place in time where there's a lot of concerns about what's happening environmentally and what's happening up here in regards to our water, you know, our soil, our lands. So I was really thinking about that, and this is a wonderful collaboration because some of the fabric came from an artist that I met when I was down in the Bayou area, and it was another woman from the Homa Nation, Tammy Greer, and she loves to dye, and she dyes fabric from plants. And she had sent some up for me to work with Monique. And when I thought about this, I contacted her. She goes, well, I should have some lightweight fabric, but if I don't, I'll dye some for you. And so I had this package arrive. And in the meantime, I had a conversation with Monique and the director of the Weissman, who were both unfamiliar with sundogs. And we had talked about, there was just this beautiful sundog, and Monique and I were here in the Watermark talking to us, and she goes, what's a sundog? And so I was like, oh. And so this suddenly had to become a sundog, and that's what it wanted to be. And so that's what it became. And so that's the blues and the colors of our winter skies. And so I dedicated this piece to Monique so that she would always remember about our sundogs that we have in our skies up here. In part of our conversation in the work, you'll see where we're thinking about we exist in this space between, like by the river, between the earth and the stars see everything that we do. And so we kind of got going on this path of thinking about, yeah, no matter what is going on here, the stars are observing us. So it's not like a true quilter might go, oh. Again, raw edges, thinking about it in the terms of this piece that will change over time because the dyes aren't necessarily permanent, just like we aren't permanent. So it'll be interesting to see how this piece changes over time, because it's already changed a little bit in the center. And so it'll be really interesting. And it's contradictory to this idea of archival and forever that museums and galleries have leaned towards over the centuries. And so I think Monique and I are both about resisting that or challenging that or bringing alternative thoughts into spaces and talk about value systems and what is significant and what really matters, you know. So the stars are a lot more forever than anything else we'll ever accomplish, but it's good to know they're there. Monique has been working on a body of work for a number of years that incorporate her love of maps and her love of community. So she has done a number of images that she brings into spaces to show the lives and truths of her Homa Nation in her community and the people that she loves, and to honor those people that are significant to her. So I really just felt like this was a lovely way for us to do these transitions. The map, the large map we talked about, this is very impressive. It's like 4 by 17 feet. And she manipulated the map and changed the names back to the original names in indigenous languages at both ends of the river. So if you come up and look at it, you'll see what we named those lakes and waterways. And then we also put in significant sacred sites that we know about along the Mississippi River. So we wanted to impress the notion or the realization that there's been life and ceremony and sacredness to this river for a very, very long time. And that we wanted to reincorporate those places that we know are important to the people who were here originally and first. Thinking about all these layers of understanding, layers of contemplation, history, understanding what is true to you, what is sacred to you, what is connected to you, and the surprise of how you're connected sometimes in ways you weren't expecting. I really love it, and I love maps myself in a different kind of way, but I love the aesthetic and the sort of the intersection that we've created through use of form, the concepts, and then sort of how the color naturally moved in particular directions. So I think that it is a conversation going on all the time in these gallery spaces between the pieces. So this was the unexpected piece in the exhibit for me. I named it the 8th Street Gang Honor Song, an ode to Lorraine, who was my mother. But I had originally had the idea that I was going to work with a cyanotype and I was going to create another blanket. And then I realized I started copying and collecting all these photos of my mother. And it's important to context these photos. My mother's family was the first Ojibwe family to buy property in Bemidji after it became Bemidji. There were 10 kids. They grew up and were part of Bemidji as a community itself. My father's family came down from the Boundary Waters, and he came to Bemidji when he was in 8th grade. So this is where they met, and they were friends with each other's siblings, and so there's this whole history, and I'm thinking about alternative history in Bemidji, because the visibility of our Ojibwe community is still working to be as apparent as they should be. Because this is our land and our space. We're between 3 reservations in Bemidji, and it's a place of significance to us historically and today. But what I understood when I saw how my mother was very determined to have a good life for herself and her family and to enjoy her growing up years in Bemidji. And so it became this celebratory piece instead. And so all of these images have my mother or her family that are in these images. And so it is a history of her life from very young, from when she was a child until she married my father and they moved out to Washington State. And so we're going to celebrate. She was also the first Native homecoming queen at Bemidji High School in 1951 or 52. And so we want to recognize and honor her for that. So we're going to have a little reception for her at the end of the month. But like I said, this piece makes me happy, and I hope it makes her happy when she sees it later this month. So the final piece and ongoing work in this exhibit is the memory map in the making. And this piece came out of the idea of this intersection or this amalgamy of blanket and maps, because I was really struggling back, what is it this, is it that, it's both. And then I thought about how memories are maps and maps are memories, and I started playing with that idea. And I was going to have something a little bit different, and then I started thinking about this idea of collective memory and community, and I'd really thought about how do I want this to happen, because I'd like it to be a living piece of art. And so I ended up doing a minimal, I did hand stitching in it and put in some of my poetry, and then a handful of images of myself and people that were important to me, but left it open as a canvas, and then I invited people to add to the memory map. And so it was originally this big when I installed it, and it didn't have any of these little pieces on it. I sent pieces to people who have made memories or are in my memory map to add to it, and people have come in. But I also thought about, I was inviting the audience to help develop this memory map. And I was thinking, you know, most people aren't going to be carrying around something they want to pin up on a map. And I started thinking, oh, I'll do sort of little miniatures like my unfinished business. So I started just taking little pieces together and making, and again, it's this process of thinking, and I'm remembering landscapes I've been in, rivers I've been by, and just provide those for people to add if they'd like. And so it's growing and expanding and filling up, and I just really love the response that's happening. People are writing amazing things in the book that's with the piece, very touching and humbling thoughts that are being shared. And people from all different places. I'm still thinking on now what else, it's so inspiring to me. It's like I want to push this concept of collective memory. And I may keep it and continue extending it in some other space and place where people can continue to add to it. But I have images that are symbolic to me, tradition, like the geometric floral patterns, the waves. So there's symbolism in there, but it's kind of this abstract. I used some of my scraps from shibori and had things that looked like leaves on water. Just everything that was reminded me of water life, and water is life. And it's just keeps growing the way it wants to.
Thank you so much for watching this special director's cut of Common Ground. If you have an idea for Common Ground in North Central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call 218-333-3014. To watch Common Ground online, visit lptv.org and click local shows. To order episodes or segments of Common Ground, call 218-333-3020. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Closed captioning is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people November 4th, 2008. If you watch Common Ground online, consider becoming a member or making a donation at lptv.org.